recess at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2 and House Rule 11, Clause 2, the chair may postpone further proceedings today on the question of approving any measure or matter or adopting an amendment for which a recorded vote is ordered. I now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank the gentleman from North Carolina. Pursuant to notice, I call up the committee print providing for reconciliation pursuant to House Concurrent Resolution 14, the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2025 for purposes of markup, and move that the committee transmit the recommendations of this committee and all appropriate accompanying materials, including minority, additional supplemental, or dissenting views to the Committee on the Budget in order to comply with the reconciliation directive included in Section 2001 of the Concurrent Resolution of the Budget for fiscal year 2025, HCon Res 14, and consistent with Section 310 of the Congressional Budget and Empowerment Control Act of 1974. And I think that was one sentence. The clerk will report the committee print.
Committee print providing for reconciliation.
Without objection, the committee print will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The chair now recognizes himself for an opening statement. The difference between President Trump and President Biden is night and day. In just 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration allowed 8 million illegal aliens into the United States. Of that 8 million, the Biden-Harris administration releases at least 6 million illegal aliens into American communities, while nearly 2 million evaded GOP or CBP apprehension and entered as gotaways. These 8 million include at least 99 aliens on the terrorist watch list. 99 potential terrorists were released into our neighborhoods and communities. 8 million illegal aliens, that's like a city the size of New York City. This unprecedented surge of illegal immigration has resulted in millions of otherwise removable aliens being allowed to remain in the United States. And understand this. This was done deliberately, intentionally, starting on day one of the previous administration. Day one, the Biden administration said, we will no longer have people wait in Mexico, remain in Mexico while we evaluate their claim. We will no longer build the wall, and when you get here, you will not be detained, you will be released. And those three intentional, deliberate decisions are what led to the 8 to 10 million entering our country. The American people gave President Trump and House Republicans a mandate to restore immigration integrity, security, and enforcement. And President Trump is carrying out what he told us he was going to do. But resources are needed to address the chaos caused by the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies. Today, we act to improve or to provide the administration with the resources it needs, pursuant to existing authorities, to ensure secure borders and safe American communities. The committee's reconciliation title provides a total of $81 billion in funding to the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, Health and Human Services, and others. For example, the legislation provides $45 billion to ensure U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement can detain an average daily population of at least 100,000 aliens. The bill provides $8 billion to fund additional ICE personnel, including 10,000 enforcement and removal officers, 1,000 Homeland Security investigations agents, 750 support personnel, all to carry out immigration enforcement. The committee's reconciliation bill provides $14.4 billion to ICE to support the transportation and removal of at least 1 million aliens annually for the next 4 years. The text also provides $858 million for hiring and retention bonuses to the good men and women, officers in ICE and agents and attorneys who implement and help secure our border. Before most aliens can be removed, they must go through an immigration court proceedings. So the committee text not only provides $1.32 billion to ICE for additional trial attorneys who represent the government in immigration courts, but also $1.25 billion to the Department of Justice to hire 200 immigration judge teams, as well as necessary support staff and courtroom resources. Also included in the committee bill is $500 million for the Department of Justice to combat drug trafficking, including fentanyl and other illegal drug use. In addition to funding immigration enforcement, the committee's reconciliation text also raises more than $77 billion through fees. The existing fees in the immigration system have not been updated, in some cases for decades. and in many cases, fees have never been applied at all. This system has left these agencies with funding shortfalls paid for by American taxpayers. The fees included in this bill will allow agencies to achieve cost recovery and limit their reliance on taxpayer funding. They will also allow us to make the necessary investments in immigration enforcement in a fiscally responsible manner. For example, the reconciliation bill requires aliens who file an asylum application to pay a fee of not less than $1,000. Congressional Budget Office has estimated this fee will raise $748 million over 10 years. The bill also requires illegal aliens in the United States pursuant to temporary protected status to pay a $500 fee, and those on TPS who apply to renew their employment authorization to pay a fee of $550. CBO has estimated those fees to raise $2 billion and $4.7 billion respectively over the next decade. The bill requires aliens who register for diversity immigrant and visa lottery to pay a $250 fee, which CBO has estimated will raise billions of dollars in additional revenue. These and other resources and fees in this reconciliation text will ensure that the Trump administration has the adequate resources to enforce the immigration laws in a fiscally responsible way. The committee's bill also provides resources to improve the activities of agencies in the rulemaking process. These resources will make agencies more efficient and effective by requiring that they adequately account for the cost imposed by rulemaking activity and by consolidating authorities that are currently spread across the government. The measures in our package are necessary to provide the resources to improve immigration, enforcement, and regulatory improvement. I urge all members to support the committee's reconciliation package, and I yield back and now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, it must be tough to be an authoritarian. You promise everybody in the world to get elected. Prices will go down on day one. No more inflation. We're going to end Russia's war on Ukraine. The world's going to respect us. And then you get in, and even though you inherit an economy from your predecessor that's described as the envy of the world by The Economist magazine, you crash everything. The economy today is shrinking. The stock market is sinking. Inflation is soaring. $7 trillion in American retirements and wealth has been destroyed. You've plunged us with your imbecilic tariffs into a trade war with the whole world, except, of course, for your bosom buddies in Russia. So now, only 100 days in, with 100 unforced policy blunders, you're the most unpopular president at this point in your presidency in more than 80 years. Barack Obama stood at 69% in the polls. Ronald Reagan was at 73% in the polls. Truman was 87%, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, 68%. But Donald Trump is at 39%, the lowest 100-day approval rating since polling began. He controlled the agenda for 100 days. He controlled the House. He controlled the Senate. He's got everything going for him, and his numbers are in the gutter. So now he reaches back into the authoritarian playbook. Go back and please the wealthiest people and corporations in the country. House Republicans want to cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid, food assistance for mothers and children, veterans benefits, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, any programs that help actual people, all in order to pay for another gargantuan tax break for the president's billionaire benefactors. And here in the Judiciary Committee, our good friends want to help Donald Trump use his power in violation of the Constitution that we are all sworn to uphold and defend against enemies, foreign and domestic. Every day, the administration uses immigration enforcement as a template to erode constitutional rights and liberties. They round up people in the street and disappear them to the torture prison of a foreign dictator without 1 minute of due process, sweeping up completely innocent people who have no criminal record and no criminal charges, in the midst of other people who may have criminal records and criminal charges and should stand prosecution for them if they do have charges against them. They're stripping college and graduate students at American universities of their visas for writing op-eds that the administration disagrees with. They invoke emergency wartime powers like the Alien Enemies Act to fight a military invasion at the border while telling us that the border has never been safer than it is right now. My colleagues say all these measures are necessary to deport gang members, violent criminals, the worst of the worst. But they're not targeting the worst of the worst. They're arresting judges now. They're using federal agents to round up law-abiding members of the community with no criminal records, parents of American children, husbands and wives of American spouses, people who have not been shown to pose any public safety threat at all. They're breaking into cars to arrest mothers as their children's watch in terror. They're arresting people who are coming in for their citizenship interviews. They're staking out people's homes and trolling through IRS taxpayer data in search of tax-paying people to deport. Look, we know how to remove people from the country who should not be here. President Biden's administration did that. We know how to do it legally, consistent with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. But the Trump administration has discarded the rule of law. If he can sweep non-citizens off the street and fly them to a torturer's prison in El Salvador with no due process, he can do it to citizens too. Because if there's no due process, if there's no fair hearing, you've got no opportunity to object. And indeed, several American citizen children, including one with cancer, were flown to Honduras last week with no due process, as a Trump-appointed judge in Louisiana found. Now the courts have issued more than 95 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders against this reign of lawlessness. But Republicans want to enable President Trump to keep going. This Judiciary Committee bill seeks to strip the courts of their power to hold an administration in contempt when the president violates explicit judicial court orders. And it doesn't stop there. While they try to defund the courts, they're forking over an astonishing $81 billion to the administration for more of these immigration roundups. The legislation includes a whopping $45 billion for ICE on top of its annual budget of $9 billion for family and adult detention centers alone. This bill is a blank check to the administration to do more of what we've already seen. And to make matters worse, as they race to spend more than $81 additional billion on this, Trump's own DOJ is terminating hundreds of millions of dollars in existing grants. They're cutting funding for county, state, and local law enforcement. They're cutting funding for opioid addiction treatment programs. They're cutting funding for crime prevention, and they're cutting funding for victims of rape, sexual assault, and violent crimes. The grants being cut support local police in solving and preventing crime. They help the survivors of abuse and assault navigate the legal system, and yet they're being wiped out by the Department of Justice. They're also trying to handcuff the agencies that work to make sure our food and drugs are safe and our air and water are clean. The REINS Act is buried in here. It would prevent the government from enforcing our civil rights, protecting workplace safety, and guarding against misconduct by banks. It would require both houses of Congress and the president to approve every major rule from our agencies to take effect, virtually guaranteeing no effective regulatory action on any subject. They've also tucked the Midnight Rules Relief Act in here, which would allow Republicans to bundle hundreds of regulations all together into a single package and vote them down on a single jumbo resolution, which would be used to hide the most destructive deregulatory votes among dozens of others, completely burying it in darkness. Look, this version of an authoritarian America is not what the American people want. Please take note, this is why Donald Trump's polling numbers are in the gutter and an historic low. This is not what the American people are looking for. We urge our colleagues to walk back from the brink here to support many amendments we plan to offer today that will save us money, that will actually address the real problems of the country, and that will protect the constitutional rights and freedoms that we cherish so much in America. This is a test. Are we going to stand up for the majority of the American people, for our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and the freedoms we fought for, or are we going to stand with a president who wants to throw it all away? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back without objection. All other opening statements will be included in the record. The chair now recognize himself, excuse me, for the purpose of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature
Without
of
objection, the amendment in the nature of a substitute will be considered as read and shall be considered as base text for the purposes of amendment The chair is recognized to explain the amendment. The amendment in the nature of a substitute makes a small change to section 70115 to clarify that the funds made available to the Office of Refugee Resettlement may be used to transport UACs in their custody. The amendment also makes a few technical changes, such as correcting typographical errors that do not affect the substance of the committee print. I urge adoption of the amendment and yield back.
Mr. Chairman,
Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from New York is
I
recognized.
move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Donald Trump was narrowly voted into office on the strength of a number of promises. He told us, quote, "Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again to bring down the prices of all goods." He said of the war in Ukraine, quote, "They're dying, Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying, and I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. He even said, quote, "I will get it settled before I even become president." And shortly before his inauguration, he bragged that the stock market had surged because of his election. He called it, quote, "the Trump effect." Well, here we are 100 days later, and we're really seeing the Trump effect in action. The stock market has plunged because of his chaotic and catastrophic tariffs. The middle class is struggling to stay afloat as prices remain high, and war still rages in Ukraine. With the economy teetering on the brink of collapse, our international alliances fraying, and wars tearing nations apart across the globe, this country is facing serious challenges that require serious solutions. So what the House Republicans think our country most needs right now? Big surprise. Tax cuts for billionaires. It is their tried and true answer for everything. Although their plan would add trillions of dollars in debt, which would put to rest once and for all the fiction that they actually care about the deficit, their plan also cuts $1.5 trillion in vital programs that Americans rely on. They want to gut Medicaid, which would deprive seniors, children, people with disabilities, and working families of needed health care services. They want to cut student loan programs, and they want to slash SNAP and other nutrition assistance programs for the most vulnerable among us. These cuts would be on top of the near dismantling of the government currently being carried out by Elon Musk and his merry band of teenage hackers. While DOGE is busy tearing apart government agencies, firing workers en masse, slashing the basic medical and other basic research that provides the foundation of our future economic prosperity, and slashing services for the American people, the world's richest man stands to reap billions of dollars in government contracts and massive tax cuts from a grateful Republican Congress. That tells you everything you need to know about the priorities of our Republican colleagues. The Judiciary Committee's contribution to this boondoggle for billionaires includes a hodgepodge of items that have been on the Republican wish list for years, such as a slate of anti-regulatory bills and other measures that are little more than giveaways to big business at the expense of individuals, families, small businesses, and states. But the lion's share of this proposal would devote tens of billions of dollars to promoting the Trump administration's cruel, inhumane, and lawless immigration policies. In just 100 days, the administration has shredded fundamental notions of due process, attempted to rewrite the 14th Amendment, and defied courts that are holding the administration to account. It is a breathtaking assault on the Constitution, and the Republican Congress has done nothing but cheer them on from the sidelines. But now they want to get in on the action, helping the White House to turbocharge its extreme anti-immigrant agenda. Instead of spending $45 billion on warehousing immigrants in detention facilities, as this bill would do, we could be shoring up Medicaid, student loans, and SNAP. Instead of enabling the administration's illegal and unconstitutional mass deportation scheme, we could be holding hearings on why U.S. citizens as young as 2 years old are being deported with no meaningful due process, or why a 4-year-old citizen with stage 4 metastatic cancer was deported without medication or the ability to contact their doctor. Instead of spending tens of billions of dollars on a reckless, chaotic, and unconstitutional immigration enforcement regime, we could be working to restore more than $800 million in grants that the administration recently cut from the Department of Justice. These are funds to provide assistance to victims of domestic violence, trafficking, and violent crime, to support efforts to reduce recidivism, and to provide support for local police departments and correctional facilities, among other grants. But here we are instead, providing massive funds to help the Trump administration continue to separate families, decimate our economy, and strike fear in our communities. I urge my colleagues to oppose this dangerous legislation. and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Georgia, and then the gentlelady from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans ran for office saying that they would fight for everyday Americans who were struggling to afford rent and buy eggs. But today, they are leading a GOP spending bill that is an all-out assault on working families, seniors, and anyone who is just trying to get by. Here in the Judiciary Committee, we are considering one part of a larger package that prioritizes tax breaks for Trump's billionaire buddies like, like Elon Musk at the expense of the rest of us. This isn't leadership, it's betrayal. Americans deserve a government committed to uplifting every family, not a rigged system that takes health care and Social Security away from you and your loved ones so that they can line the pockets of billionaires like Elon Musk. Apparently, Trump and MAGA Republicans think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and their billionaire buddies need another yacht or another mega mansion more than you need your insulin, your Social Security checks, or a nursing home for your aging parents. That's just not right. We must reject this budget reconciliation bill because our nation's prosperity should be measured by how well ordinary Americans thrive, not by how happy we make mega billionaires like co-President Trump. Well, Trump is a billionaire too, like co-President Musk. I reject the larger package, but I also want to talk for a minute about the judiciary piece of this spending bill. There are so many ways, we could spend money within our committee's jurisdiction that would make our lives better. We could put money towards gun violence prevention, towards finding and helping missing and exploited children, towards supporting Second Chance Act recipients who are trying to reintegrate into our communities, and towards so many other programs that would strengthen our communities. Instead, this is a bill aimed at shutting out all immigrants and locking up children in unlicensed, private for-profit facilities for unlimited amounts of time at taxpayer expense. It's about preventing our government from going after businesses that cheat and overcharge you and that evade paying the taxes that they owe. It's about preventing the government from keeping your air clean and your water safe. And it's about making sure that Donald Trump's administration cannot be held to account when they violate the Constitution. I oppose the judiciary piece of this reconciliation package, and I will strongly oppose Trump's spending package when it comes to the floor because I support the everyday people, not Trump's billionaire buddies. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the 100 days since taking office, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and their Department of Greed and Ego have taken a literal chainsaw to our government, eliminating and threatening programs that help people in every corner of this country, both red and blue. Trump's policies are destroying the strong economy that he inherited from Democrats. In the last quarter of 2024, our economy grew by 2.4%. But in just the first 100 days of Trump's administration, our economy has shrunk by 0.3%. It is the worst quarter we've experienced since 2022. And it's no surprise that Americans' confidence in our economy has dropped for the 5th month in a row and is at its lowest level since the start of the COVID pandemic. 100 days of anxiety, chaos, and complete destruction. The bill that we're marking up today will not stem the tide. It's a betrayal of the middle class, and it's going to destroy the infrastructure that every American depends on. Millions of children, low-income seniors, and people with disabilities will become uninsured and see their health costs dramatically increase. The bill includes, at minimum, $880 billion of cuts to Medicaid. And let's be clear, this isn't a red state or a blue state issue. 1 in 3 Americans depend on Medicaid for their health coverage. We're talking about nursing homes for 5 out of 8 seniors and stealing health care from 38 million kids across the country. That's over 800,000 kids in my home state, over 3 million kids in Texas, and about 1.2 million kids in Ohio. It's just cruel. Now, remember when Trump said he'd lower costs for Americans? This bill would cut crucial food assistance by at least 20%. Never mind that 4 out of 5 households that rely on SNAP have a child, a senior, or a person with disability. And what we're considering today in this committee would make things even worse when it comes to our ability to lower prices. This bill would eliminate the Federal Trade Commission, an agency tasked with protecting consumers and promoting competition. Just last year, the FTC successfully blocked a grocery store merger between Kroger and Albertsons, 2 of the largest supermarket chains in our country and certainly in my home state of Washington. Blocking this merger preserved competition in grocery stores throughout the country. If we're serious about lowering prices, we should be giving the FTC more resources to fight corporate monopolies and even the playing field so that small businesses and startups can thrive and consumers can get better services at affordable prices. The immigration provisions in this bill just facilitate the illegal and unconstitutional actions that target immigrants of all immigration statuses, including U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, foreign students, and even U.S. citizen children who are in the midst of cancer treatment and have been deported. And for all the talk from some Republicans on the other side, every time we have a discussion on immigration about how we love people who come here and do things legally, the so-called immigration fees that are in this bill are really fines and nothing but a cruel attempt to make immigrating to this country impossible. It's especially horrific in how it would treat unaccompanied children, effectively ending the U.S. protection system for kids by blocking them from accessing life-saving anti-trafficking protections that were established in the bipartisan Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. So when we talk about how this bill is a Republican betrayal of the middle class, it's not just that. It's immoral, it's cruel, it's an all-out assault on everything that we hold dear. It's promises made and promises broken by an administration that cares more about the for-profit prison operators that bankroll Republican campaigns than the young U.S. citizen children who have been deported from their country of birth. That cares more about big pharma CEOs than families that rely on Medicaid. That cares more about insurance shareholders than seniors getting ripped off. Republicans are allowing stealing from everyday Americans just so they can lower taxes for the biggest corporations and wealthiest billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. This Republican betrayal is the largest redistribution of money from working class Americans to the wealthy. And it's being done on the backs of our kids, our seniors, our families, our U.S. citizens, our legal permanent residents, people who have been here contributing to this country. It is unbridled greed, corruption, and cruelty, and I will be voting against it. I yield back.
The gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word. House Republicans have spent the last 3 months insisting that they are the party of working people, that they care about the struggles of working people. And now they have control of the House, they have control of the Senate, they have control of the White House, and they actually could be doing something about it. And yet, instead of passing legislation to make life easier and more affordable, they are doing the opposite. This bill is a betrayal of working people. It's a betrayal of the middle class. So let's start with the overall plan here. Republicans are proposing a massive cut to social services in this country. Services that my constituents in Vermont rely on. I'm thinking about the nearly 164,000 Vermonters on Medicaid who are at risk of losing their health care. The Republican legislation means parents and grandparents who rely on Medicaid for long-term care and nursing homes for their family members. They're going to have that rug pulled out from under them. It means that rural hospitals, not just in Vermont, but in all of your rural districts are going to close too. It's just a math problem. Medicaid goes away, rural hospitals close. The Republican majority and Donald Trump want to kick working families to the curb and give people who don't need another massive tax break another leg up. The wealthiest 1% in this country do not need more advantages. They have plenty. These cuts are a crystal clear indication of where your priorities lie. Now let's talk about what is on the agenda for this committee specifically. With this slice of the reconciliation plan, Judiciary Republicans will be doubling down on Trump's lawlessness and cruel immigration policies, fueling Trump's attacks on our independent judiciary and making it easier for big businesses to get away with price gouging and making it more expensive for regular people to survive. Today, my Republican colleagues are voting for sky-high fees for folks who are just trying to comply with immigration laws. Does anyone really think that somebody who is fleeing to our country for relief as a refugee can afford hundreds or thousands of dollars to seek asylum or their day in court? It's nonsense, and you know it. And with these fees leveraged on those who can least afford it, Republicans are dedicating billions of dollars to hire and empower an immigration enforcement reign of terror. They want to greenlight more masked agents, more hooded people, more unmarked cars, yanking people off the streets, deporting them without any due process. This is America. This is what actually sets us apart from people in the rest of the world, is due process. You can laugh all you want, but if we don't stand up for due process, we are not the United States of America anymore. The bill in front of us will allow Republicans to further insulate this administration when it flagrantly violates the law and the Constitution, making it harder for courts to stop illegal actions. My Republican colleagues are once again using their position, instead of helping working people, they're using their position to attack judges, to attack the very foundations of what makes us Americans. And you're trying to shutter the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, making it harder for us to enforce our antitrust laws. Let's talk about fairness. Let's talk about competition. Let's talk about all my small businesses who just want a fair shot. Why would you go after the FTC and make it harder for small businesses to survive in this landscape? You all talk about competition. You all talk about a healthy process in this country, to have competition, to have a healthy economy, and then you go after the FTC. It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't pass the straight face test. It's all more of the same in here. You are not looking out for working people. You are not standing up for small businesses. You're not standing up for rural America. You're not standing up for our rural hospitals. You're not standing up for the people who desperately need Medicaid in order to get basic health care. When I vote no on this Republican budget, I'm going to be thinking of all the working people in Vermont who sent me here to work on behalf of them, not big corporations, not authoritarians who are would-be dictators, to work on behalf of them. And I will be thinking of all of the immigrants, those who have become part of the fabric of Vermont's economy and our communities, who are heartlessly being attacked by my Republican colleagues today. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Today, Judiciary Republicans are jamming through a bill to flush billions of taxpayer dollars into the cesspool that is this administration's lawless, chaotic, cruel, and dishonest immigration agenda. In doing so, they're using this committee once again to vilify immigrants and push a false narrative, otherwise known as lies, that have led to the wrongful arrest and deportation of U.S. citizens, outrageous attacks on the First Amendment rights of green card and visa holders, and the detention and deportation of long-time contributing members of our communities. That includes people who've been deported by mistake, without due process, and in some cases without cause, in violation of court orders, to a prison in El Salvador which is infamous for its depravity and dangerous conditions. And rather than owning its errors, this administration is refusing to bring home those it has wrongfully deported and imprisoned in that hellhole, using our taxpayer dollars. Meanwhile, our Republican colleagues are backing this administration's campaign of fear and lawlessness, whether by cheering it on or turning a blind eye and a deaf ear. They're standing by as this White House attacks judges, denies people due process, defies the court, and lies about what it's doing. This is not keeping our communities safe, and it's not immigration enforcement. It's un-American attacks on the truth, on people, and on the law. It's authoritarianism, and that's just it. Today, it may look like just attacking immigrants, but no one should kid themselves. It's clear the rights of every single person in this country are at stake. Because if you don't stand up and protect an immigrant's right to due process, then you don't support anyone's right to due process. Because if the government can deport someone based on false or unverified claims without proof that someone is a criminal or a gang member, or even without proof that someone is not a citizen, then the government can jail or deport anyone, including my friends here. Without due process, every one of us is defenseless against a government that can do whatever it wants if it is not held accountable. The truth is that if this administration can deny the rights of some people, there's nothing stopping it from denying the rights of all people all across America. Just as there's nothing more fundamentally American than the rights and freedoms we all enjoy and should all defend, there's also nothing more American than the long and impactful history of immigration, right at the heart of our nation's story. And it shouldn't be the work of this committee or this Congress to aid this administration's attempts under the immoral and lawless leadership of the likes of Stephen Miller and Tom Homan to destroy the very liberties that make America special and strong. I deeply oppose this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Garcia, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Today is a shameful day in the House Judiciary Committee as Republicans move forward with their plan to trample on the Constitution and the working families so that they can give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. Let's take a step back and ask where our country is 100 days into the Trump administration. The economy is in the toilet, with people losing thousands of dollars in retirement savings and no progress being made on the affordability crisis affecting ordinary Americans. The executive branch is being gutted. Nothing has been done about actual waste, fraud, and abuse, like the nearly $1 trillion budget given to the Pentagon, which has never passed a financial audit. Instead, Republicans have turned over the keys to Elon Musk, who's trying to dismantle agencies that fight for workers and consumers over billionaires like him. Republicans have fought against diversity, equity, and inclusion, talking about merit. Meanwhile, Trump has anointed some of the most embarrassingly incompetent and unqualified cabinet members in our nation's history, like Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem. And to distract the country from the incompetence and the giveaways to billionaires and corporations, this administration is terrorizing immigrant communities. They are rounding up entire families, targeting unaccompanied children and people with no criminal history, denying them due process and defying judges and shipping them to Guantanamo Bay and spending millions in taxpayer dollars to jail them in a mega prison in El Salvador. They're even deporting U.S. citizen children with cancer. That is pure evil. But it doesn't stop there. Republicans know their agenda is unpopular. So they're running authoritarian crackdowns to stifle legitimate protest and dissent. They're throwing people in jail and deporting them on the basis of protected speech, attacking colleges and universities, and even going after law firms. All of this is cruel. It's incompetent, but it's also unconstitutional. And that's why Trump is losing in court. Over 100 court orders have been issued blocking his actions, many by judges appointed by Presidents Reagan, Bush, and even Trump himself. And the people of this country are realizing that none of this is in their interests. That's why Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating of any president in the past 100 years, and why he is underwater in every single issue. But Republicans don't serve working families, they serve billionaires and wealthy corporations. So here we are, faced with this cruel bill. Instead of doing anything to tackle the affordability crisis, Republicans are using reconciliation as the vehicle to advance their cynical agenda of giving trillions of dollars in tax breaks to people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, while cutting vital resources for our communities. Things like Medicaid, food assistance, and school lunches, Pell Grants for students, health care, and infrastructure. They're also going to gut asylum and spend tens of billions in a giveaway to ICE, a rogue agency that's terrorizing communities and trampling on civil liberties and the Constitution itself, because they've been directed to do so by this president. Just look at what's in this bill. They want people fleeing violence and persecution to pay $1,000 so they can apply. They want people to pay $550 every 6 months to work. They want people to pay $900 to appeal rulings against them. They are commodifying the immigration system. And these giveaways to ICE, $45 billion for detention facilities, which in 13 years worth of their current detention budget. Over $1.3 billion for the Office of Principal Legal Advisor, $40 million to screen children for tattoos and other supposed gang affiliations. None of this makes sense for working families. I know this firsthand. My district is home to predominantly Latino immigrant and working class families, and my constituents are not asking for more tax breaks for Elon Musk. They're not asking for CFPB, the National Labor Relations Board, or the FTC to be gutted. They're not asking for Medicaid or food assistance to be cut. So I'm proud to stand with my district in opposing this assault on our communities. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Kamala Gerdove, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I move to strike the last word. You know, reading through this package, I was struck by how un-American it is. As un-American as arresting judges, trampling on our due process, deporting Americans, and terminating our federal workers. It is antithetical to the values of this country. We are essentially voting on a package that supports selling off citizenship to sometimes the least worthy while deporting babies with cancer, on top of cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare, cutting Social Security, cutting access to baby formula, cutting food assistance for kids. And then there is this fertilizer bill, which I like to say, which will also support terminating federal workers, which includes Capitol Police. I can't tell you how many Capitol Police have come up to me and asked me how their job is at stake and what's going to happen to them. And I say, well, don't go ask a Republican, because they are throwing you to the wolves. You know, reading through this package, I think of Horatio Algiers, an American author who wrote about rags to riches stories, those from humble beginnings who made it here because of the opportunity in this country. And that is the basis of immigration. You come here, you do not have to have money, you do not have to have a name, you do not have to have influence, but you have to have drive and grit and ideas and a diversity of thought. That becomes the currency that makes this country strong, that makes us unique. And what are we doing here with this package instead? We are saying that we don't value that kind of person anymore. We don't value diversity or strength. We don't value grit. All we care about is your check. But I'm here to tell you that is not what makes a workforce strong. That is not what makes industry strong, schools strong, this country strong. That is not a value system based on real merit. And instead of supporting innovators, earnest people with drive and ideas, like those immigrants that came here before us and helped make this country great. You are essentially saying that you're going to pay off citizenship to somebody who has the money to do so. They don't have to have any talent. They don't have to have any drive. They just have to have some kind of money in the bank. They don't have to be worthy. And to add some more duplicity to this fertilizer that we're going to be voting on today, Republicans talk so much about regulation, too much regulation. We need to deregulate the economy, the environment, our financial services, because so much regulation means less progress, less creativity, according to Republicans. But this here bill is about hyper-regulation, over-regulation. You're over-regulating how many people come here, who comes here, what they have to look like, how you kick them out, and not just undocumented folks, but Americans. Hey now, because we're seeing that happen. So I guess you have to raise enough nickels, since he's getting rid of the pennies, to pay for the tax cuts that you are getting to the richest of the rich, on top of cutting Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, things that people in my district care deeply about. And let me remind you that California has 7 of the 10 highest enrollee districts in this country when it comes to Medicaid. And another thing, I know Republicans, I talk to Republicans, I have Republicans in my district. And real talk, there are many Republicans who have fallen in love with immigrants, who have married immigrants, who have hired and mentored and worked with immigrants. And not all of those folks, not all of those immigrants were wealthy or came here with a big old dowry. But they came here with some drive, and they had ideas, and they had earnestness. Had enough for you to want to work with them, hire them, have ideas and dream ideas with them, fall in love with them, care about them. And how many of those folks would be allowed in this country today if this thing were in place? So let's just have some real talk when we are talking about voting on something that is un-American and antithetical to all of the values that we uphold, values that you would be upholding if the president were a Democrat instead of the one we have in office right now. So for these reasons and so many others, I will be opposing this bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair is now recognized for a manager's amendment. The clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The chair is recognized to explain the amendment. This amendment revises the ESTA, the Electronic System for Travel Authorization fee section, to lower the overall fee amount from $50 to $40 and increases the amount authorized to be transferred to Brand USA from $500,000 to $20 million. Finally, the amendment also removes the section that will consolidate antitrust enforcement authorities and resources in the DOJ Antitrust Division. And finally, the amendment also increases the funding provided to the Secret Service for additional resources, personnel, training, and technology from $1 billion to $1.17 billion. I urge all members to support the amendment, and I yield back. Who seeks recognition? Gentlelady from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Domestic violence shelters, protection for judges, better training and support for police officers, and rebuilding trust between law enforcement and our communities. These are just some of the things that we should be investing in to truly make America safer. This committee has a $110 billion budget to protect our nation, instead of using it to support multiple agencies that handle safety, justice, and security. We're being asked to pour it all into just one agency, an agency that has been used to target and intimidate communities for this administration's political gain. That's not how we build real public safety. Meanwhile, our prisons, they're falling apart. Officers have come to my office and told me that pieces of their ceilings are literally falling on them as they work. Judges who face violent threats just for doing their jobs are left without enough protection. Just last Monday, a deputy in Texas was shot outside a courthouse. And did you know that it takes a victim of domestic violence, on average, 7 tries before they escape their abuser? We should be using this funding to help these victims and strengthen the agencies that support them. Right now, we're facing major safety and health problems all across this country. Agencies like the FBI, ATF, Federal Bureau of Prisons, U.S. Marshals, and our court system all need resources to do their jobs and to keep people safe. Yes, criminals should be arrested, and they should receive their due process. But we also need to protect our judges, keep our prisons safe and functional, and support victims before the worst happens. This committee, and every one of us in here, in this committee, has the power to pass a bill that takes all of this into account. One that actually makes America safer for everyone, and safer for everyone in this room. But focusing all this money on just one agency and targeting one group of people doesn't do that. It's not what the American people deserve. And it's not the reason why you sent us here to represent and support your interests. We need a balanced, thoughtful approach to public safety, one that puts real protection and real justice first, putting people over the partisan politics. And I yield back.
Generally yields back. The question occurs on the manager's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the manager's amendment is adopted. Who seeks recognition? Oh, can I do one thing real quick here? I ask unanimous consent that the letter from the Congressional Budget Office stating that the committee's reconciliation proposals comply with the instructions in House Concurrent Resolution 14 be included in the record. Without objection, they will be included in the record. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Move to strike the last word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the little known passages, sections that snuck into this bill is the very last one, which is section 70303, called restriction of funds. What it does is it makes it much, much more difficult for a judge to enforce a contempt order. Wonder why the Republicans are trying to do that. As 2 judges have threatened to hold the administration in contempt of court for defying court orders, now the Republicans, rather than encourage the President of the United States to follow the rule of law, to follow court orders, including a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling, are actually trying to make it easier for the president to violate court orders and violate the law. And this is the Judiciary Committee. Most of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are lawyers themselves. Their entire careers have been around abiding by the rule of law. And now, rather than hold the president accountable, uphold our Constitution, uphold the fundamental rule of law that undergirds our entire system, no, they are trying to limit the ability of courts to enforce contempt orders. Now, contempt orders are just simply orders by a judge holding someone in contempt when they do not follow a court's order. So when, for example, the administration continues to fly people who have had no due process to a terror prison in El Salvador after a judge has said, don't fly anyone there, that's a violation of a court order. And if that judge wanted to enforce that order, he would hold the administration in contempt. And if they do not comply with that, there are escalating penalties, financial, even potentially jail. So that is what's going on right now. And the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case is the best example of this because the Supreme Court has ruled unanimously. And let's be real, this is not a 5-4 decision that is hyper-partisan. This is the 3 Republican justices that Donald Trump appointed to the Supreme Court, and 2 others who are so far to the right of them, they're off the reservation, agreeing that the administration violated due process and needs to facilitate the return of the person who was, they admit, mistakenly removed. What does Donald Trump say last night? I have the power to return him, but I am not going to. That is direct defiance of a Supreme Court order, a 9-0 Supreme Court order. And you would think that my congressional friends on the other side of the aisle who take an oath to uphold the Constitution, who understand that Marbury versus Madison establishes that it is the courts, not the president, who gets to interpret the laws. It is the courts, not the president, who gets to determine whether someone should be deported or not. You would think that they would say, let's make sure that our president is actually following court orders. Because if he's not following court orders, then why would anyone else follow court orders? And our entire system breaks down. That is clearly what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to be a king who gets to make all of these decisions himself. He has already grabbed willingly all of Congress's power as a check and a balance on the executive branch. Now he's going after the courts. But instead of trying to uphold our system of checks and balances, my Republican colleagues want to make it easier for Donald Trump to disregard court orders. They are perfectly happy for Donald Trump to become a king, a dictator. And it is shameful that they put this clause in there to make it easier for him to defy court orders. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report. Point of order reserved by the gentleman from California.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
Objection, the amendment will be
substitute.
considered as read. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much. The amendment requires the government to provide due process to anyone removed from the United States by virtue of any funding in the bill. Now, I know most Americans are out there saying, wait a second, why do you have to inscribe due process into a budget reconciliation bill when it's already in the Constitution of the United States? And indeed, due process is already required by the Constitution, as the unanimous Supreme Court found in Donald Trump versus JGG on April 7th, just 3 weeks ago, in a 9-0 per curiam opinion. Quote, it is well established that the Fifth Amendment entitles aliens to due process of law in the context of removal proceedings. So both citizens and non-citizens enjoy due process under the Fifth Amendment, which says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So why do we need this amendment indeed? Well, President Trump and Stephen Miller and Elon Musk, a former undocumented immigrant himself, believe that people can be swept up out of their houses, out of their workplaces, off of the streets, and sent to a torturer's prison in El Salvador without any due process at all. And there they can remain for the rest of their lives. Does everybody understand that? They're taking the position that no due process is required when people are swept up off of the streets. And as numerous federal judges have pointed out, if they can do it to non-citizens, they can do it to citizens too. Because if you assert as your defense that you're a citizen, but you don't have the opportunity to get before a court, which is what a fair hearing under due process is all about, they can still get away with taking you out of the country. Now, and in fact, what one district, D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals judge, Patricia Millett, remarked when the argument was made that this was a power that was appended to the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, even assuming that that applies, even assuming that we're at war with Venezuela when we haven't declared it, even assuming that there's an invasion of our country when the courts doubt it, but even assuming all that stuff, she said, Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemies Act during World War II than has happened here. In other words, they got hearings. They got actual hearings. Now, whether these deportations are taking place under the Immigration and Naturalization Act or the Alien Enemies Act or any other statute makes no difference at all, because the Constitution is supreme to all statutes, and everyone is entitled to due process. All 9 justices of the Supreme Court agreed with this conclusion at, I think, 1 in the morning, or maybe it was 12:30. So, Mr. Chairman, why is due process such a fundamental American value? Why are these the 2 most beautiful words in the English language which separate our freedom from arbitrary government power? Well, the last several weeks provide vivid evidence of the profound and dangerous miscarriages of justice that can and will take place if we abandon due process. Take the case of Jose Reyes Barrios. This is a 36-year-old professional soccer player and coach. He's an asylum seeker from Venezuela awaiting the date of his asylum hearing. But unbeknownst to his family, he was arrested and swept up and flown out of the country to El Salvador as part of the government's dragnet campaign against Tren de Aragua. But he had no criminal record, there were no outstanding criminal charges against him, and he had no association with any criminal gang. And yet he was sent to the dictator of El Salvador because he has a tattoo on his right arm which was mistakenly associated with Tren de Aragua. In fact, the tattoo is of a soccer ball topped with a crown which signifies his favorite soccer club, Real Madrid. Had there been any kind of due process fair hearing, he would have been able quickly to explain the government's error. And there being no other evidence against him, he would have been released. Today, right now, he remains in prison in El Salvador. Consider the case of Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay makeup artist and barber who fled Venezuela's brutal Maduro regime, which was persecuting him simply for being gay. He had passed his credible fear interview here in America in the asylum process. In fact, his asylum claim was pending when he was swept up in the government's campaign because of his benign tattoos of 2 crowns, one symbolizing his father and one symbolizing his mother. Which I see, is my time run out, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it has.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentlelady from California is recognized.
I asked to strike the last word, and I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you very kindly to the gentlelady from California. So Mr. Romero had passed his credible fear interview, which is a necessary part of the asylum process. He's waiting for his asylum claim to be heard, and then he was arrested. Why? Simply, again, because of tattoos, which I would remind everyone are not illegal in the United States of America, and millions of citizens and non-citizens alike have tattoos. Well, he had a tattoo, one symbolizing his father and one symbolizing his mother, and that became the sole basis for his removal. He missed his asylum hearing because he was behind bars in this notorious mega prison outside of San Salvador. 60 Minutes reviewed his media posts going back for more than a decade. They could not find a shred of evidence, not an iota of evidence linking him to any gang activity at all. If the government has some, of course, bring him back, produce the evidence. Nobody wants gangbangers who've committed crimes out on the streets. Bring him back and prosecute him. But you don't take an innocent person not facing any criminal charges and throw them into a torturer's dungeon in El Salvador. Take finally the shocking case of 24-year-old father Frangel Reyes, who now sits in the same El Salvador prison of dictator President Bukele, where he has been falsely accused as a gang member in this completely unilateral administrative process. Frangel not only has no criminal record, no criminal history, and no connections to Tren de Aragua, he doesn't even have any tattoos. Instead, he was picked up because someone else's information was accidentally pasted into his government's e-file. His government e-file. The document accusing him of gang membership actually lists someone else's last name multiple times and contains multiple different ID numbers. Again, they got the wrong guy. That's what due process is all about. Making sure that the government, which is not infallible, which is not perfect, which I've heard many of my friends on the other side of the aisle say before, should not be allowed to put somebody's life, liberty, and property in permanent jeopardy, put them behind bars forever, without even the opportunity to say, you made a mistake, that's not my name, that's not my ID number. This guy's behind bars in El Salvador's infamous Center for the Confinement of Terrorism, where no visitors are allowed, no rehabilitation or education programming is taking place, and where prisoners are not allowed to spend any time outside. And if they can do it to non-citizens, they can do it to citizens too. Because if you get swept up and you allege your citizenship to try to keep from being banished to El Salvador, you've got no one to argue with if you don't get a due process fair hearing. Indeed, just last week, 3 U.S. citizen children, ages 2, 4, and 7, were sent to Honduras with what a Trump-nominated judge in Louisiana, Terry Doty, said was no meaningful due process at all. Due process are the 2 most beautiful words in the English language. They separate our freedom from the arbitrary and tyrannical power of government. And without due process, no one is safe from being falsely accused of being a gang member or a terrorist and summarily disappeared to a foreign gulag or dungeon. I trust all of my colleagues will support me in this amendment to ensure that our laws embody this most fundamental constitutional value. The money that we're appropriating today, the money that is going to be going out through the Budget Reconciliation Act, should not be used to fly people out of America and put into somebody else's prison without due process of law. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I would just add, Mr. Chairman, that a woman walking down the street, a graduate student, is approached by masked men in plain clothes, put in handcuffs, and put into an unmarked van and shipped off to a prison miles away. No due process. That could happen to anyone. That could happen to anyone. And that's why due process is in the Constitution, to protect the rights of every person here. We give that up at our peril and at the peril of our democratic republic, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak up strongly in support of the ranking member's amendment. I think it is really important that we understand what's going on. I think many times when you look at democratic backsliding and you look at authoritarians or wannabe authoritarians, what they do is they first target a population that is the most vulnerable. They target a population that they think that maybe they can win the sympathy of the American people or of any people in targeting that particular population. And the idea here is to show that if you can do it to that people, that group of people, then, and nobody says anything, then you can go further and do it to anybody else. And I think it is very important to recognize that in this moment, they are trying to say that due process does not apply to you if you're an immigrant. And now they've gone further than that because they're actually taking U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, people who are here with legal status already. So they've already moved on quickly to every person, and I just think it's important that we remind people that the Fifth Amendment's guarantee is that, quote, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and it applies to every person in this country regardless of their citizenship or their immigration status. Now, the ranking member gave multiple examples of where due process was completely flaunted by the administration. And I think it's also important that we point out what happens when due process is provided. Because when you get the courts to weigh in on some of these cases, we are hearing how outrageous the judges think that these situations are. So I'll give you the example of a Venezuelan couple. This is Cesar and Norelia, who had temporary protected status. This is a legal status, had filed an asylum petition, and yet the administration arrested them 3 times. 3 times, and they alleged that because Noelia's husband, who she divorced over a decade ago, is now deceased, was involved with a gang, that the couple are de facto high-level gang members. Now, the government produced absolutely no evidence of any gang membership for the Venezuelan couple. And Judge Brickema of the Eastern District of Virginia said, when she looked at the evidence that was presented, because in this case, due process actually happened. They had to go to court, or they were forced into court, and the judge looked at the evidence and, quote, said, "This is a terrible, terrible affidavit. If this were before me in a criminal case and you were asking to get a warrant issued on this, I would throw you out of my chambers." I was shocked when I saw this. This is a direct quote from the judge. Now, in the Western District of Texas, Judge Briones, I hope I'm saying that right, was the next judge to review the government's very scanty evidence on the couple as they were rearrested after being summoned to Texas to stand trial. And that judge ordered them released and, quote, said, quote, "Respondents asked this court to accept their claims going off of nearly nothing to substantiate their mammoth claims that petitioner is a senior member or perhaps just a member or maybe at least the affiliate of a gang." The court would not accept this evidence, even in a case where only nominal damages were at stake, let alone what's at stake here. Beyond these shoddy affidavits and contradictory testimony, respondents haven't provided membership. They have not demonstrated to this court by a preponderance of evidence, let alone the required clear, unequivocal, and convincing evidence that the petitioner is a member of a gang, nor that she is an alien enemy within the meaning of the TDA proclamation. And the judge actually admonished the government for wasting judicial resources. I want to go through this case because it's important to understand that the government does not have evidence to present, which is exactly why they are trying to bypass the courts. If they have evidence, then show it. Show it. Go through the due process, go through the courts, have a judge look at it. There are ways you can get people to be deported and you follow the due process laws, but they don't have it. They don't have it. For all these people they are deporting, picking up with masked men. And God knows, who are these masked men? Can any masked man with an unmarked car come and pick up any U.S. citizen, any legal permanent resident, any student that's walking the grounds? Is that what the country has come to? Is that what my Republican colleagues are allowing to happen? So we should all support this amendment, and I hope that both sides of the aisle do that. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California, then Georgia.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized. They give you the TV.
We are 100 days in to this administration. If this was the how it started, how it's going meme, it started with people wanting cheaper eggs. Fair. Costs were going up. People were anxious, and they wanted to see the goods that they were buying at the grocery store, at Home Depot, at Walmart, they wanted to see the costs come down. The president promised that he would lower costs on day one. That is a quote. "I will lower costs on day one." He is 0 for 100. He's 0 for 100. That's how it started. How it started, how it's going. This is how it's going. The president deported a 4-year-old American citizen with cancer. stage 4 cancer, took him away from his American citizen father and his American cancer treatment. People just wanted cheap eggs. And now you're deporting kids with cancer. We are so far off course from where the American people wanted this administration to go. I'm going to lower costs on day 1. He's 0 for 100. Today, we saw that the first time since 2022, the GDP is going down. Your 401ks are 201ks. We had hoped it would just be a Trump slump, but now it's a Trump train wreck. But it's not just pocketbooks. It's our values that are under assault. A 4-year-old American citizen deported while fighting cancer. Man, that's cruel. That's just one of the worst things I can think of a government doing to its own people. But I guess it shouldn't surprise us that the gang that put national security secrets in the group chat, or the gang that fired CDC measles experts as it was raging in Texas, or the gang that was laying off people at the FAA as planes were crashing, I guess it shouldn't surprise you that their incompetency and their cruelty would merge and bring us this. On today's bill, Mr. Chairman, there was an opportunity to work with Democrats to address the immigration crisis. I want our border to be secure. I want security at the border. I want as many resources dedicated to that as possible, because I understand that as much as my colleagues and I want comprehensive immigration reform, the American people have told us we want the border secure. And the workforce crisis that we have in America to address shortages in hospitality, food and beverage, agriculture, construction, we can't do that until we secure the border. You have partners here who want to help you do that. But you're deporting kids who are American citizens with cancer. So you not only have lost the Democrats, this was your strength, and every first 100 days poll shows that you've lost the American people. When I go home, I'm going to check in with a 7-year-old who's getting more and more curious about what I do at work. And I'm going to ask him, what did he do at school? And his response is never satisfactory, and it never is when you ask a little kid. But when he asks me what I did at work today, do you know what I'm not going to tell him? I didn't make it easier to deport an American citizen with cancer. What are you going to say? And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, first, they came for the Latinos outside of the Home Depots trying to get work so that they could feed their families. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a Latino at the Home Depot. Then they came for the Hispanic-looking folks wearing hats backward with tattoos, and they deported them to El Salvador. And I didn't say anything about that because I don't wear my hair backward, and I don't have any tattoos, and I don't look like a Latino. Then they came for the Latinas at home taking care of the children. They scooped up the Latinas and the children, some of whom were American citizens. one of whom was receiving treatment for cancer. They swept them up, took them off, and deported them. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a Latina. I'm not a little child who's an American citizen. Then they came back for the students studying on the college campuses who were here on student visas. They sent jackbooted thugs wearing masks to pick them up, take them thousands of miles away and put them in a private for-profit detention center where they languish at taxpayer expense. And I didn't say anything about it because I'm not a student on a foreign visa. And then they came and arrested a white female judge, a state court judge, presiding over her courtroom and the litigants therein, managing the affairs of her court. And they came and arrested her and perp walked her to jail. And I didn't say anything then because I'm not a judge, a white female judge, state court. But then they came for me. And I looked around and there was nobody left because I had remained silent and they had taken everybody off. Now, I just kind of paraphrased a poem written by a gentleman from Germany, which resonated back then as it does today. And it's important that the people understand what is happening with our constitutional rights in this country. Everyone is entitled to due process, whether or not you are documented or undocumented, whether or not you are a citizen or not. You're entitled to due process, and that is what this amendment seeks to affirm. That is well-established law that is being ignored, along with other parts of our Constitution, by this lawless tyrant who is our president. And so I support this amendment. I ask my colleagues to support it, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Vermont is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a short video I'd like to show.
Nice.
A family traumatized after armed federal agents busted into their home as they were sleeping and took almost everything they own. Problem is, they were not the people agents were supposed to be looking for.
News 4's Spencer Humphrey is here with their frightening ordeal. Spencer, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, get this. That family just moved here about 2 weeks ago from out of state, and this is how their life in Oklahoma got started. They say they told federal immigration agents they had the wrong people, but those agents kept treating them like criminals, even though they're all U.S. citizens. Fear.
I did feel at times that I was gonna die.
So much fear.
I kept praying. I said, God, please let me live through this moment.
Humiliation.
I was a zero. I was nothing.
Pure disbelief.
I just couldn't understand how is this happening to us.
All just for wanting a fresh start.